Buddhaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Dhammaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Saṅghaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi. Saṅkhittena panchupada nakkanda dukkha. In short, 5 aggregates affected by clinging are dukkha, discomfort. Friends, this excellent utterance is from the maiden discourse of the Buddha, which is the Dhamma Pavattana Sutta, setting in motion of the wheel of the Dhamma. Tonight, I am very happy, I am glad to be here with you all to practice the Dhamma, to understand the Dhamma and practice the Dhamma. I really appreciate your presence here to practice with me. Concurrently, I would like to thank each and every one of you for inviting me this time also to give this series of Dhamma talks and lead a retreat. As Eileen mentioned, this is after 5 years. So it's good we meet again and again, understand the real words of the Buddha. We all should understand the real words of the Buddha. If we simply understand, simply read the later works, it's not enough. It doesn't work properly. We have to go to the original teachings. That is my purpose of learning the Dhamma, practicing the Dhamma and sharing the Dhamma. All of us as Buddhists follow the Buddha who attained full enlightenment and taught us the way to attain full enlightenment, who became a tamed one and taught us the way to become a tamed one, who came to the state of perfect peace and taught us the way to come to the state of perfect peace, who crossed the sansaric flood and taught us the way to cross the sansaric flood, and who extinguished all sort of fire of defilements and taught us the way to extinguish the fire of defilements. Buddho so bhagava bodhaya dhammam deseti. Danto so bhagava dhamataya dhammam deseti. Santo so bhagava samataya dhammam deseti. Tinno so bhagava taranaya dhammam deseti. Parinibbuto so bhagava parinibbanaya dhammam deseti. This is in Pali. Tonight our topic is the mission of 5 aggregates in the 6 sense bases. According to the teachings of the Buddha, we all beings in the whole universe cling to 5 aggregates. What are the 5 aggregates? Form, feeling, perception, volitional formation and consciousness. These five. Where do they arise? In the six sense bases. In the six sense bases. What are the six sense bases? The eye, ear, nose, tongue, body and the mind. This is what we have to understand clearly. All beings cling to these five aggregates, but unfortunately people think that five aggregates, when they talk about five aggregates, some people say that we leave behind five aggregates and go after death. That is a mistake. You to understand this, we can understand this later. All beings, when you say all beings, who is a being? Once Venerable Radha went to the Buddha and asked Bhante, being is said. What is a being? The Buddha said, rather, one is tightly stuck in desire, lust, delight and craving for this form. Then feeling, perception, volitional formation and consciousness. For what? Five aggregates. Those who cling to these five aggregates are called beings. So we all are beings. What about Buddha? What about Arahants? No, they are not beings, because they are not clinging to these five aggregates. Therefore, they are not called beings, satta. We have the bases. I is a base. Based on the I, five aggregates arise. Based on the ear, five aggregates arise. Based on the nose, five aggregates arise. Based on the tongue, five aggregates arise. Based on the body, five aggregates arise. Based on the mind, five aggregates arise. So the arising and perishing of five aggregates is not a problem. That is the nature. It happens to everybody, even to the Buddha, the Arahants. They themselves have five aggregates. Having five aggregates is not a problem. The problem is beings, worldly beings, average beings, average persons cling to these five aggregates. That is the problem. That is why it is said that affected by clinging is dukkha. At the very beginning I said five aggregates, affected by clinging is dukkha, not having mere five aggregates. One day the Buddha said, live in one single day seeing the arising and perishing nature of the five aggregates is better than living 100 years without seeing the arising and perishing nature of the five aggregates. Once Venerable Sariputta explained what is called birth. When we talk about birth, he explained, Venerable Sariputta explained in the exposition of truth, the discourse named Exposition of Truth. He said, birth means manifestation of five aggregates and obtaining of six senses. So why is it called manifestation? Because these are mental. 5 aggregates are mental, not physical. That is to be understood. So these 5 aggregates are, as I said, misunderstood. Unfortunately, 5 aggregates have been mistaken, misunderstood, misinterpreted and mistranslated by many in society, including myself earlier. Now I can understand that specifically the form. We think this form is what is called form aggregate. This form, this corporeality, which is incorrect. Form should be understood as this corporeality is one and the aggregate, form aggregate is another. That is to be understood clearly. All these 5 aggregates immediately arise and immediately perish in the 6 sense bases. Form as body is one, form as aggregate is another. Once Venerable Sariputta distinguished the difference in the Mahahatti Padopama Sutta. Mahahatti, the greater discourse on the elephant footprint, where Venerable Sariputta gave a simile to understand this clearly. He said, when the space is covered with timber, clay, hay and wine, when the space is covered with this, it's called house. That is what is called house. When the space is covered with timber, lumber or whatever, and then clay, wine and hay is called house. Likewise, when the space is covered with bones, sinews, flesh and skin is called form. You see, that is one kind of form. That is this form. Whereas again the Venerable Sariputta himself explained how this form aggregates comes to be. He said internally the eye is intact. External form has come to the range of the eye. Then the corresponding conscious engagement is appearing. Together with that, consciousness arises. Consciousness arises. Where there is form, that form is considered as form aggregate. That means form aggregate arises in the eye. Likewise, the form aggregate arises in the ear. Form aggregate arises in the nose. Form aggregate arises in the tongue. Form aggregate arises in the body. And the form aggregate arises in the mind. 6 types of form. 6 classes of form. These are to be understood clearly. Not only form, whatever the feeling arises there with the support of contact, that feeling is called feeling aggregates. Venerable Sariputta explained this further. Feeling aggregates. Whatever the recognition is called perception aggregates. Whatever the volitional formation arise there is called volitional formation aggregate. And all these are very well detected by the consciousness. That consciousness is called consciousness aggregate. So all the 5 aggregates are there in the eye, in the ear, in the nose, in the tongue, in the body, and in the mind. That is the way. This form, if we grasp this body as the form, what happens? We cannot explain spontaneous beings. You know, spontaneous beings means beings are born without parents' union, like hungry ghost, devas, brahmas. They have no body like ours, made of 4 elements. So, in order to explain this, in order to understand the Dhamma clearly, we have to understand form aggregate is not this body. Not only Venerable Sariputta, the Buddha himself said this in the Maha Satipatthana Sutta. Yang loke piya rupang sata rupang ettesa tanha uppajjati uppajjamana uppajjati nivisamana nivisati, referring to the arising and perishing of craving. Buddha said, craving arises at the place where it is pleasing and agreeable. Pleasing and agreeable place in the world. The world means within us. So, craving arises at the place which is pleasing and agreeable. Piyarupang satarupang. Then with the question, what is the place which is pleasing and agreeable, pleasing and agreeable? Then Buddha said, I is a place which is pleasing and agreeable. Then forms, whatever form is an agreeable place. Where the Buddha said form of form, that means form that we grasp from our eye. It is not the form outside, but the reflection. That is what is called form, not the forms made of 4 elements, but the reflection, the image that we take from the external form. So form, likewise, we have form of sound, form of odor, then form of taste, form of tangible, form of mental object. 6 kinds of form. The Buddha said this in the Maha Satipatthana Sutta. One day, a certain student came to the Buddha named Hemaka. He came to the Buddha and said, Bhante, before I came here, I went to meet different teachers. They all taught me, some of them taught me something happened in the past. Some others taught me that things will happen. So they talked about past and the future, not in the present. He asked Bhante, please tell me the Dhamma. He said, Tanha Nighatanang Muni. That is how he addressed the Buddha. Muni means sage. Who is this sage? This different sage? As he understood, he is the destroyer of tanha, craving. Destroyer of the craving. great sage, please teach me the Dhamma, he asked. Then the Buddha said, in short, he said, Ida hemaka, ditta sutta mutta vinyatesu piyarupesu chanda raga vinodanang nibbana padamachyutam. That's very brief talk. He said, Hemaka, here what you see, whatever you see, whatever you hear, whatever you smell, whatever you taste, whatever you tangible, and whatever mentally you think. Of these there is the form. Form. If you can abandon the desire and lust to these 6 forms, Nibbana is that itself is Nibbana. That's the meaning. So in this manner, it is clear that form of 5 aggregates is the form in the 6 sense bases. That is very clear. According to the Bija Sutta, seed discourse, there's a discourse in the connected discourses, there's a discourse named seed, where the Buddha explained the nature of our consciousness, vijnana. Some people believe that vijnana, the consciousness, is going here, then there alone. Like alaya vijnana, even alaya vijnana, perhaps you might have heard that. So going from one place to another alone. But Buddha said, no. If one would say that vijnana is coming from somewhere else, it's coming here alone or going from here alone, it is impossible. Why? Consciousness, vijnana, should go together. Go together. Together with what? Together with other aggregates. Whenever it moves, whenever it takes another birth, other aggregates are there. That is the meaning. One day a certain monk came to the Buddha and said, Bhante, please teach me the Dhamma in short, in brief, so that I can practice properly. Buddha very clearly, briefly said, Manyamano ko bhikkhu baddho marassa. I use Pali. I want to use Pali. This is my way. Pali, Pali is the Buddha's language. When we use this Buddha's quotation, we can understand this clearly. That is why I use Pali. Manyamano bhikkhu baddho marassa. Amanyamano mutto papimato. In brief. You see, crisp advices. Manyamana. What is Manyamana? Manyamana means clinging as mine, me, myself. If you cling to anything as mine, me, myself, you are bound to Mara. If you do not cling to things as mine, me, myself, you are released. That's it. Then he said, Bhante, I understood. And he then started to practice. Another monk, when he came to the Buddha, he himself asked the same thing. Please teach me Dhamma in brief. Buddha said, Upadhyamano bhikkhu baddho marasa. Upadhya, upadana. Upadana means upa. Upa means inside. Adana means to grasp things and keep it inside. Upadana If you have upadana, attachment, then upadana pacha bhava. It goes to the bhava, existence. Therefore, Buddha said, if you grasp this, you are bound to Mara. If you do not grasp, you are released. That is Nibbana. In this manner, Dhamma should be understood. Again, in the Bhara Sutta, Bhara means burden. Burden. Buddha said, monks, I will teach you the burden, the bearer of the burden, the taking up of the burden, and the laying down of the burden. So, what is the burden? The 5 aggregates. 5 aggregates are the burden. Then who is the carrier of the burden? The person. Taking up of the burden means what? Taking up is craving, and the laying down the burden is the cessation of craving. You see? If we cannot understand 5 aggregates properly, we cannot understand Dhamma properly. We then think personally. We think personally. Whole teaching of the Buddha is based on mind. Mind is the forerunner. Mind is the forerunner. That is why we have to understand these mental actions, the mission of the 5 aggregates in the 6 sense bases. Their mission is clear. Their mission is clear. The mission is that they arise and perish all the time. Our consciousness, these 5 aggregates, jump from one sense to the other, like from ear to, from eye to ear, from ear to nose, nose to tongue, tongue to body, body to mind, like that. They arise, that means they arise and perish in different senses, one at a time, one sense at a time. One day the Buddha delivered a discourse named characteristics of non-self. You know, the Buddha delivered his first sermon to 5 disciples. Eventually they did not understand the first discourse properly. Only one person, Venerable Kondanya, understood the Dhamma and he became a stream enterer. But others could not understand this Dhamma. Why? They were clinging to these aggregates. They were grasping this aggregates as self. I, myself. Atta. Self is Atta. They could not understand. Right after that, the Buddha had to deliver another special discourse to show them the non-self, characteristics of non-self, Anatta Lakkhana Sutta, where the Buddha started the discourse with, monks, this form is not self. You see, that is how the Buddha started. This form is not self means not this body. Body is not the aggregate. Form aggregate is to be understood. This form is not self. This feeling is not self. This perception is not self. This formation, volitional formations are not self. The consciousness is not self. If one would take this as self, then one should be able to control oneself. One should be able to say that may my consciousness, may my form be thus, may my form not be thus. Like that one should be able to control. Now nobody can say that may I be no sick like that. People want to live alone. May I live alone like that. You can say, but nothing happens because there is no self. In the whole teaching of the Buddha, Buddha very clearly has said that no self and nothing is there which is belong to self. When Satchaka, debater in the time of the Buddha, there was a person named Satchaka. He was a debater. He boasted that nobody here in this city to debate with me. He said, even the Arahants, Buddha himself, no Shramanas, no Brahmin, nobody here to debate with me. And then he saw Venerable Assaji. Venerable Assaji was going from house to house begging. Then he went to meet Venerable Assaji and asked, how does Gautama, Buddha, advises his disciples? What is his instruction? Then Venerable Assaji said that the Buddha's frequent advice is to understand these five aggregates. This form is impermanent. Feeling is impermanent. Perception is impermanent. Volitional formations are impermanent. Consciousness is impermanent. Then this form is not self. This feeling is not self. This perception is not self. These volitional formations are not self. This consciousness is not self. This is the teaching. This is how the Buddha advises his disciples. That is what he said. Then this person, Satchaka, said, oh, I heard something not to be heard. This is something wrong, a misunderstanding. I should go, one day I should go and meet the Buddha and correct this. With that idea, on the same day, he went to meet the Buddha together with about 500 Lichavis, 500 people. And he invited the Buddha to a debate where he asked whether the Buddha says this. Then the Buddha said, yes, this is how I say. Then Buddha said he accepted that the form is self. That is his idea, his conception. This form is self. Feeling is self. Perception is self. Volitional formations are self. Consciousness is self. In order to prove this, he said that, see, it's all things, all people, all things, they all depend on this flow, earth. Like that, we all depend on self. We all do good deeds, bad deeds, dependent on self. So the Buddha asked him, now you see this, there are kings, different kings. Buddha asked, can they use their power exercise their power in their own kingdom. Like whenever they want to banish something or execute somebody, whenever they want to destroy anything, can they use their power in their territory, in their kingdom? Then he said, Satchaka said yes. Then Buddha asked, like that, can you control, can you say, can you experience or exercise, like saying, may my body be like this, like that? Can you control your body in such a way? He accepted that he can't. Buddha taught him the Dhamma, and finally he understood that there is no self within the five aggregates, within or without, no self. He understood this Dhamma, and finally he became a disciple, he became a follower of the Buddha. He invited the Buddha and the monks for the following day lunch dana. So in this manner we have to understand the Dhamma. Buddha very clearly said dukkha means five aggregates. Now we are talking about four noble truths. Of the four noble truths, first aggregate means five aggregates. First, dukkha. Dukkha, the cause of dukkha, the cessation of dukkha, and the path leading to the cessation of dukkha. Where the first one, the noble truth of suffering means the aggregates, five aggregates. One day, Venerable Girimananda became sick. As he got sick, Venerable Ananda went to meet the Buddha and reported. The Buddha taught him 10 perception, dasa sanya. Of the 10, first one is anicca sanya, the perception of impermanence. When we practice this according to the teachings of the Buddha, impermanence of perception, this perception, impermanence means five aggregates. We have to understand form is impermanent, feeling is impermanent, perception is impermanent, volitional formations are impermanent, and consciousness is impermanent. This is how you have to understand five aggregates. So all those who can understand these five aggregates in the six sense bases, whenever they arise, this is the application. How to understand these five aggregates? In order to understand these five aggregates, we have to be mindful whenever they arise. When we see the object, we see the form. That form, the external form, when there is light, then a ray of light comes to our eye, through which we make an image of the external object. So that light hits the most sensitive part in the eye, which is called pasada rupa. With that we make the image. That image is what is called form aggregate. Then we feel that That is what is called feeling aggregate. Then we recognize, perceive it. That perception of form and feeling is called perception aggregate. Then we evaluate it, and if we grasp it, we leave behind as a cause. We leave behind it in the volitional formations aggregates. If we leave behind anything as a cause, then there should be results. Now, that what we leave behind is what is called grasping, upadana pacha bhav. The Buddha said upadana pacha bhav. It is because of that grasping, attachment, there is existence. There are different existences. There are 31 realms to be born again and again. That is what is called bhava, existence. The Buddha taught the Dhamma not to roam in these different existences, but to cut off, cease this sansaric journey. So those who want to understand the teachings of the Buddha should understand this mission of the five aggregates in the six sense bases. We cannot understand this because of our ignorance. According to the ignorance discourse named ignorance in the connected discourses, Buddha said ignorance means ignorance of form aggregates, feeling aggregates, perception aggregates, volitional formation aggregates, and ignorance of consciousness. It is because of our ignorance we cannot understand. If we can understand this, if we are mindful at the time of contact, we can understand the form aggregates, feeling aggregates, perception aggregates, volitional formation aggregates, and consciousness aggregate. That is what is called science, wisdom. Wisdom arises in this manner. Whoever practices this Dhamma in this manner can understand this Dhamma. Otherwise, what happens? When we see the object, we cling to this object. When we cling to object, we cling to five aggregates. Clinging to five aggregates is the way to go to samsara. That is with what you call sakkaya ditthi, personality belief. We cling to five aggregates. Five aggregates are grasping. Therefore, we will be born again and again in samsara. With the 10 fetters, there are 10 fetters. Of the 10 fetters, first one is called personality belief. The personality is the five aggregates. Clinging to five aggregates is called personality belief. That one should cut off that first fetter. When one cuts off the first fetter, one can cut off the next two also. Together with that, one becomes an extreme enterer. So that Dhamma is to be practiced within these six sense bases and the five aggregates. Those who can understand these five aggregates can understand four noble truths. So four noble truths are to be understood within the six sense bases. Then three characteristics of existence. Three characteristics of existence are also to be understood within the six sense bases. Then the dependent origination. Dependent origination is also in the six sense bases. All these can be understood with the understanding, realizing of the five aggregates in the six sense bases. Friends, this is why we have to understand the five aggregates arising and perishing in the six sense bases. So this is the way to practice. So if we can practice in this manner, we can understand, we can block this, we can cut off our thinking patterns, wrong thinking, discursive thoughts, and then we can come to the state of peace, and finally we can realize this Dhamma here in this very world. Whenever we cling to things, we are bound to samsara. As the Buddha said, if we grasp, we are bound to Mara. Then Mara has the different fields. Mara's fields are the 31 realms. People do good deeds, bad deeds, and practice meditation, jhana, and then they are born in different realms. Those who practice jhana, they were born in Brahma worlds. Those who did good deeds, they were born in heavens or in the human realms. Those who did bad deeds were born in hells. This happened even before the Buddha. So Buddha's teaching is not that. Buddha's teaching is different. Buddha's teaching is Dharma path. It is not Karma path. Karma path and Dharma path are two different things. We have to, as Buddhists, we have to understand the Buddha's clear teaching. That is Dhamma. Dhamma path. In order to understand the Dhamma, we have to understand ourselves. Dhamma is within us, basically within the five aggregates and six sense bases. Why? Person's birth means birth of five aggregates, manifestation, appearing. They are appearing. Not five aggregates are not born. Five aggregates are manifesting. Where? In the six sense bases. So they said, Khandanang Patubhavo, Ayatananang Patilabho. That is what happened as birth. Then, if we are mindful at the time of arising and perishing of the five aggregates, we can understand that that is what is called anicca, impermanent. We can understand impermanence nature. If we can understand the nature of impermanence, we can understand the nature of unsatisfactoriness and soullessness, selflessness also. This is how we have to understand Dhamma. As I said, if we can understand this Dhamma, we can understand these different principles, mainly the Four Noble Truths, the dependent origination, and the three characteristics of existence here in this very world. Then we do not want to go. We will not be born anywhere else. All those who cling to these five aggregates will be born in those 31 realms. Those who do cling to these aggregates will remain here, and remainlessly we can extinguish fire of defilements. We can come to the state of calm, peace, and coolness of Nibbana here in this very world. We do not want to go to any other realm to attain perfect peace, perfect happiness of Nibbana. Buddha taught that state of Nibbana that Nibbana is to be experienced here in this very world. That is the point. So let's understand this Dhamma. We can further discuss as we have time to discuss. We can discuss about this further. And as we all listen to this Dhamma talk, Buddha very clearly has taught us the Dhamma. This, if we can understand this Dhamma, we can attain, realize real peace, real happiness of Nibbana in this very world. May we all attain that peace, that happiness, that perfect peace of Nibbana here in this very world. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.